I think because, in this world, the world is flat, and we have much more easy access to get to know people. So wherever we travel and we meet people, and then if we know people much more better, and I think things will be much easier if we know the culture especially.
Dr. Gao?
Well, people-to-people dialogue is one of the most important strategy for China's being accepted by the world. And I think it's quite important because, the relationship is it's just not merely economic relationship. It's comprehensive, political, but what is the bottom line is the cultural communication. People-to-people, heart-to-heart communication is extremely important.
David, from a German perspective?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think all the relations that we're dealing with, for example, state to state, institution to institution, municipality to municipality, all these relations in the long run get back to these people to people relations, to the exchange of people and to the people to people bond. That's the nucleus, so to speak, of all the relations that are to be developed in this context.
Bayan, in doing business?
I totally agree with this. It's very important to have that kind of bonding. It's very important to understand another language. It's very important to understand other people's cultural background and to talk with them. I think it's very important.
I think we have a consensus that it is very important. However, what are we looking at when we're trying to promote the Belt and Road Initiative as a cultural landscape? And what are the challenges we are faced here? Okay, Bayan.
You travel so much.
Cultures are totally different. If you'll be able to look deeper in the society, you will be able to understand that actually Europeans are not just Europeans. There's German, it's Italian, it's French people, and the same you can say for Chinese. It's you can say the Chinese culture is it's very common, but it's totally different because it's there is a northern culture, there is a western culture in China. I mean, there is a southern Guangdong people, Fujian people, people from Kunming, from Yunnan province, and even from Jiangsu.
Does that pose problems for you when you're doing business in China?
Oh, it's not even in China. It's all over the world. When you're talking with a person, it's really important to understand what kind of cultural backgrounds they have. In China, it's collectivistic society. So there was a Hofstede. He says that China is it's more focused on collectivistic society, but
a small focus on what society?
Big focus on collectivistic society. It means that society vision, collective, yeah.
Collectivism.
Yeah, collectivism. So it's more focused on the group development. And when you're talking about the group development, you're talking about the group interest, right? In Europe and Western world, it's a little bit different because they are more focused on
individuals.
Rational, yeah, rational vision, not emotional. So for them, relationship, it's not as important as it is in China.
I agree with Bayan. You talk about the knowledge about diversity of cultures in the world is quite important and crucial. However, one point I'm going to point out is the very important problem we have to face is actually historically and present, we have a lot of misconception and misinterpretation between cultures. For example, actually, or a lot of sayings about China's kind of cultural invention in the name of Belt and Road Initiative.
Yes.
And I think it's quite
You mean
important.
cultural invasion?
Yes, kind of, or kind of, a cultural imperialism, kind of very horrible word. And actually, I think the communication between people to people by heart-to-heart ways will be very, very important for us to have a deeper understanding about each other, to see what we are in common with each other and what we are really different from each other. I think that would be a very important way for all the worlds to understand the diversity of cultures.
But how do you avoid this kind of misconception? That is the question we're asking here, right? David, what is your experience?
Yeah, I would like to emphasize the point that you have made, and I would like to introduce even a new term for what China introduces to the world. China introduces something very new. I call it harmonizing power. It is not soft power in the Western sense because it is not constructed in a way to exchange a foreign culture with one's own values or one's own
What do you mean by
cultural
harmonizing?
Trait. Harmonizing, I mean, harmonizing
Does the
power.
Chinese culture come and, integrate and then replace the local culture with
exactly
something
the
that's more
opposite.
Chinese?
It's exactly the opposite.
How do you do that?
What you have just said, that would be soft power in the traditional Western sense, so to speak. But in China, as I understand it, is nurturing the manifold of traditional cultures. So China is nurturing the manifold because China has understood that this is a richness of humanity. It is a great of great value for the future of humanity, for our creativity in the future. We have so many sources, possible sources for future creativity, and we have to nurture the differences. But at the same time, we have to bridge the gaps and the misunderstandings. So we have to come to a point of, you could say, unity in difference, or unity through difference.
What is the meaning of the word harmony in German?
Yeah, there's two meanings of harmony. One would be to be together very peacefully and friendly, and an older understanding of harmony, going back to ancient Greece, sees harmony as a unity through difference, so a unity of opposites. But of course, this also includes, in the ancient Greek understanding, includes also struggling
Sure,
of
you're
opposites.
doing it in a kind of forceful way, and that is, we believe in harmony through diversity, but not in a forcible way. Gao.
I'm not going to offend you, but let me give an example about the German. Okay. Just recently, Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, and she announced if Turkey is going to join EU, Turkey, the president must acknowledge that penalty executive should not be restored in Turkey. Now that is a kind of, Germany tried to, force Turkey to accept that kind of European culture in terms of penalty executive. But if China, what we understand the world is that different culture, different constitutions, different law system is absolutely a response to the different cultures and traditions.
The principle of
we
non-interference.
Yes,
Yeah.
we accept the diversity of cultures.
But you don't have to force the others
Yeah,
to
yeah,
accept.
yeah.
That's
We
by,
understand.
that's, by the way, that's a trait that Switzerland has learned from ancient China. The
Switzerland is-
the Swiss have adopted this feature in the 19th century.
Yes.
Yeah.
This Chinese feature of non-interference.
And they're
So-
very pragmatic,
Very
and they're very very successful
I think
as well.
like in Switzerland it was a little bit different story, because Switzerland has like if you'll consider like military power in Switzerland, it was impossible to compete with Italy, with Germany, with France at that time, because France at that time it was like Napoleon times, it was the strongest one.
The Swiss were working as commissioner, and
Yes, and so at that time it's like they need to find something, some way to develop themselves.
They were
So-
influenced by some philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment who had read the translations of Chinese writings. So there is
Maybe, yes.
there is an indirect influence, so to speak. It's
Yes.
going back
So-
to
Yes,
Albrecht
But
von Haller.
actually, it's like for neutrality of Switzerland, it's like if we are talking about Switzerland, we're talking about money. So it's like financial points.
It's an economic wu way, so to speak.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
for Chinese, a little bit different. It's
Yeah.
like it's more cultural non-interference.
Accepted,
No,
that's
it's-
true.
it's
That-
very
that's
interesting
a
that you
very
mentioned
interesting
Switzerland.
distinction, yeah.
Because I
You
lived in
worked there.
Switzerland for 6 years.
Oh.
The Swiss, I just came back. The Swiss people love what other people think about Swiss products being good, being of high quality, but they also suffer from the stereotypes. When they think of the Swiss people, they think of somebody who
Watch.
abide by the rules, but
Yes.
they're also maybe a little bit stiff, and they're very pragmatic. They only look at money and this and that. They think they're not just those. Okay, maybe they're totally different. And I think do you think that the Chinese are also suffering from the negative sides of stereotyping, Dr. Wu?
Oh yes, every time when we go abroad, then we can see the Chinese characters posters on the wall. There are no spitting, no stepping on the grass, so on. Don't speak loud, and then you feel sometimes shame. There seems every Chinese they speak, that in the public, in a loud voice, they don't respect the others, or we are not that polite enough. So it's a
But
shame.
it is also true
It
that
is true that
also
some
true,
people,
a lot of
they
people
do behave like
do
this,
behave like
you know,
this.
the tourists,
Yeah,
Chinese tourists.
what's the reason behind that?
I think they need is awareness, because back in China, they can do whatever they want. They feel so, you know, comfortable speaking in a louder voice. But, you know, in the Western, you know, society or culture, people never do this. And the other thing, yes?
Yeah, does it also have to do with the jump the Chinese society has experienced in a very short period of time? I mean, a lot of
Yes.
people grew up
China
in the
opened,
village, right?
China opened its door to the outside world. That was in late 70s,
Nine.
yes, early 80s.
Maybe
right.
I could give you a perspective that is, actually, we Chinese people have a very strong, deep love about the secular life. You know, secular life is not peaceful life. It's not quite tranquil life. It's full of noises, actually. And
You go to the tea house,
yes,
right.
at the very beginning, I think there's very much difference between Chinese and the Western people, and like the stereotyped idea. But if you have further and all-round
That's a very good point.
observation, you will find actually there's a little difference between us. And sometimes my Western friends, they also love noises in the bar.
Of course.
Very
Yes.
noisy environment, right? So
It
actually,
depends which Western
yeah,
country.
yeah, yes.
Again, I mean, if you're in southern
Think
Italy,
about-
people also like to speak
yeah,
loud. So.
a very, very typical example is Beijing opera. The Beijing opera, the drum and that kind of instrument make a lot of noises, but that also create a kind of cultural environment to see how the performers they just cast themselves into the role. That is the interpretation of Chinese culture.
You have been watching a sofa talk on the cultural exchanges and people-to-people bonding along the Belt and Road. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to a special discussion on The Point with Liu Xin on the cultural aspects of the Belt and Road.
As Professor Gao said, it's like I completely agree with the point, but the cultural points, it's very specific. If we are talking about Chinese culture, it doesn't mean like characters. It doesn't mean just Chinese food. It's not just doesn't mean just chopsticks. It's something together. So you cannot take Chinese food outside of the culture. You cannot take the characters or like Chinese clothes outside of the character. You cannot take even the relationship outside of the culture.
A holistic approach.
Yeah, because it will not be a culture. And even the noise speaking is just a part of something.
Yeah,
complex.
it's the Chinese person is that whole
Yes,
person. You can't take some and say, this is what I like,
Yes.
this is what is
Yes.
good, and
It's
the
like
other is
advantages
not good.
and
I think
disadvantages.
I
always
think the two
together.
points were very good because we have to start to look at cultures or civilizations with regard to subcultures, and also also when we look back at history, there's not the one homogeneous Chinese culture. There are levels, and also if we look at the ancient Hindu culture, we have the caste system, and they all developed their own subcultures. And they're so different, and in China it's the same. You have very quiet-minded forms of culture in Taoism, for example, and Buddhism, and you have the loud folk, lively thing. And the other thing what I found specifically interesting was that you mentioned the life, that life is important for China. And I think that's a trait
Secular.
that stems from Confucianism. And it's very important because Confucius chose life before death. He said it's more important to focus on life first. We cannot understand death if we didn't understand life before.
That is
So
also...
that's a very important
Yes.
aspect that Chinese culture can provide to the world, to teach the world, and important thing to change habits.
Yeah.
It's not about changing cultures or changing the traditions
Also,
of others, but to
basically,
change habits.
this is a
of people.
very good case in point to see how you have to look at the Chinese culture from a different perspective, because if you look at the secular part of the Chinese life, you'll see how this is something interesting about it. But on the other hand, China has been accused, or some people are saying, look, the Chinese people have no religion. You know, they don't have faith in things. But you really have to look at it from a different perspective,
true.
right? So that for any
Completely
stereotype
true.
to be overcome as any obstacle. What about the present day world we're living in, where digital technology is playing such an important role? How can we benefit from this development and make our people-to-people bond closer?
Let me give you a typical example. I'm from the university. Now we hold a lot of international conferences, and we are planning to set up a very sophisticated system to hold a kind of global conference, and simultaneously with scholars from America, Germany, and that will save a lot of money for us. That is the cheapest and energy-saving means for us to develop, and also very good means for us to enhance our university's international image. So that is also definitely a very good means for international communication. And also, another example that is, that we have is a class called E-class. Now, E-class is an extremely important means for the development of international education. And the CSU launched a program. It's called Culture Communication. Then, the number is how many? 200,000 students registered on the program to study from all over the world. It's a very big, enormous classroom for them to have further all-round communication.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Since I'm still teaching in the university, Communication University of China, 2 weeks ago, I tried for the first time in my life that I had a class which is called International Journalism, or have invited the students from, the journalists from Brazil, two from Brazil, one in Africa, one America, one in London. We have live class. Can you imagine, from 5 different continents within the time zone, 12 time different zones, and then we have the class together. The university leaders will also try to emphasize,
That's harmonizing power.
Harmonizing. They say that you have to do the reform, in different ways in this digital age. And I'm thinking, how should we do this? So, by connecting those journalists together, we share their thoughts, their stories, experiences doing the interview in different countries. Yes.
That is why the opportunity provided by the Belt and Road Initiative is enormous, because we're not just talking about building roads or high-speed trains.
Yes.
We're talking about communication platform, telecommunications, bridging the digital divide between the developed countries and developing countries so that everybody can benefit. However, we cannot overlook the differences that exist. I don't want to emphasize the differences, but the differences are there. When we talk about the Belt and Road, almost half of the countries on this map are Muslim countries, for instance, so there is a lot of difference. When we are doing the Belt and Road, do you think potential clashes of religion, of ethnicity is a problem?
It is absolutely a problem, but however, in terms of Chinese cultural characteristic, I don't think it's a big problem.
This is the point, yeah.
Why not?
Why? Because you talk about Christianity, we talk about Confucianism, Chinese culture. Actually, or comparatively speaking, now talking about Western culture, now clearly there's a clear distinction between evil and good. If you refuse to be a follower of God, you would be the follower of Satan.
Yes.
This is the same case with the Islamic culture. The only effective prophet, powerful prophet, is Allah. And besides, there will be no alternatives for your value system. However, about Chinese culture, now Chinese culture philosophy, we say, actually we have 5 elements. And we look at the world in a very, very neutral, natural way. We don't make a very, very strong subjective judgment upon what is good, what is bad. Actually, we take a very neutral, open,
we try and to compromise.
kind of compromising and inclusive means attitude to see the world. I think that is something that Chinese culture could share with the world.
That's
not teaching the world,
no,
but
share
with the world.
I think it's an interesting point also for other cultures to learn about China, that Chinese traditional culture is not based on belief systems. Also, even the modern society is not based on belief structures in the sense that...
What is this based on then? What is the Chinese society based on?
It's based on, in my understanding, it's mainly based on culture. Culture meaning human self-refinement, because you could define man as a self-refining living being.
Yeah.
So all the civilizations develop culture. So we are constantly refining technology, medicine, food, arts, our thoughts, philosophy,
Yes.
science. That's all ways of refining. It's different branches of refining, and this has been very much early on in China. Some very smart people have understood that it's very good to, if you want to have a stable empire, if you want to have a stable civilization for such a long time, you have to base it mainly, I'm not saying something against religion here, but the government or the administrative function has to be mainly based on culture. So that's I think that's the
That's the
main
difference.
trait of
Yes.
Chinese
That is why
civilization.
the central government attached very much importance to the importance of traditional culture and the importance of the role of family.
Yes.
And the
Exactly.
importance of a lot
So
of
the natural
culture
personality,
and
you could say, the
tradition.
natural person.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
remember seeing advertisement on TV, free advertisement, like this kind of advertisement for the public good, telling people to love their mother,
Yes,
telling people to
yes,
respect
yes.
their
To wash
family,
the
you know.
feet for the
Because
parents.
this
Yeah.
is very important for the Chinese culture.
Yes.
Bayan, but you
yeah.
think that religious clashes is not a
It's like
problem?
two points. First, it's like Chinese culture has very big background, but not only from Confucianism. There is another religion called Taoism. So the way of the study of way. So it's very important to understand that actually, according to the Tao, it's like there is no God as a perspective as we have in Christian or in the Islamic world or another religion, even in Buddhism. It's like every person, if he has like his own way to develop himself, he become a god. Like Three Kingdoms hero Guan Yin, right? Zhang Fei, like the Zhuge Liang, like a lot of people like this. And from another point of view, it's like Islamic culture was not like an aggressive culture. It was like if like the point we are facing now actually is like artificial points. Islam, when it started to develop like in 7th century, and from 7th century in 200 years, it comes from Arabic world to Malaysia and to south part of China. And even now in China, we can find a lot of people who have beliefs of Islam. So it doesn't mean that Islam is like says that it's like if you're Islam, it's like it doesn't mean that other people are not right. They just think that every people have their own beliefs, and you can live wherever you want.
That's a very important point. I think
Yeah.
the important issue here is all the religions, doesn't matter which kind of religion, but all they have to reach that point of maturity.
Yes.
They have to mature.
The sense of
And-
well-being.
Yeah, and they have to
Right.
mature in a
Integrity.
sense
I
that
like
they...
your word, maturity.
Yeah, you have to accept the believers of your own religion and all the other believers in other religions or even non-believers or whatever. You have to accept them as equal human beings.
Yeah,
Right,
you
and
must-
And I
respect
think
them.
there's,
Yes.
there, for
You
example,
must,
there's a good, also another good example for a monotheistic religion that comes to mind is the Sikh religion in India, in Punjab, because they accept all people as one. That's part of their religion, although the people might not believe in their
Yeah.
religion. And I think that's one of the examples for a mature religion, mature form of religion.
But David,
Well-
let me be frank. Probably it would be a little bit difficult for Western culture to adopt what you said, because according to what I know, traditionally and classically, and the Western culture, as I mentioned, is actually they seek for a certain stable, solitary interpretation about what is truth for life.
Dogmatism.
So yeah, you have a
Dogmatism.
transcendental being, the other world, to determine what is right and wrong in the secular world.
Good
So
that-
how could
Yeah, good that we need to have more discussion about this, communicate with people. This is an endless discussion. We have a very limited time. So I'm really sorry that, but I think our discussion is maturing. But we really have to pay attention to time. But before I wrap up, I understand that you have brought some cultural elements that you believe is relevant in this discussion. Shall we take a look at those, please? Bayan,
Yeah.
maybe we start
Yeah.
from you, from
Oh,
Kazakhstan.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Kazakhstan is a part like of the culture which has been developing in Central Asia, and like before it was like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, like it was the culture was a part of nomadic
Oh.
culture.
Nomadic.
Yeah, nomadic. So for us, it's like the horses was very important, and as far as the horse was important, it was like everybody should have the horse. So if you're riding the horse, you need to control it.
Yeah.
That is why the whip was the most important part of it.
Do
And
you also ride horse? Can you also
yeah,
ride?
yeah, I do, yeah.
You look very different.
Oh, that's
In,
beautiful.
What is important stuff is like every person in Kazakh society, in Kyrgyz society, should have that kind of whip
Can I
with
see
him
too?
together. So whenever I'm with another people, for example, we have debating and we've been listening each other, I cannot interrupt because it was like it was a cultural background. I cannot interrupt the person who is higher than me. So I just put whip on the table and show him that I have the word.
You want to talk?
Yeah. So it's like it's not just a whip.
This is narrative. This is your voice, which
Yes.
you want to be
You
heard.
don't have to say anything. You just put it here.
Yes,
And we want to have that. I want to have that always in the middle of a discussion. Now it's my time to talk. Okay, now it's your time to talk. David, what is you bringing up?
My favorite cultural relic, so to speak, is here. That's a edition of Wang Yangming's collected writings from 1933.
Wow.
I bought that in 2008 here in Beijing at a old bookstore, and this was starting. Personal. I went to Guizhou in 2005 with my nowadays wife, Chinese wife, and there I saw a statue of Wang Yangming, and I just got curious who this person is, who this philosopher was. And
his sentence of live what you learn, or action and knowledge are one. How is that important for the Belt and Road, to wrap up?
You know, Aristotle said to make money should always be an exercise in virtue. So to make business should be an exercise in virtue, in good doing. And Wang Yangming, in a sense, of course, we can use his gongfu, his approach, which is far more advanced than that of Aristotle in many respects. But we can use his approach to make this a reality, because beforehand this has been more or less philosophers' talk at universities. But we have to make this a reality, to make money, but at the same time to see making money as the practice of Zhiliangzhi, so to extend the good knowing. And the good knowing is, in the long run, it's Tao. It's the source. And this is it's a marvelous thinker.